Alright guys, today I want to talk about cohesion because I think it's one of the most important concepts when it comes to producing electronic music, drum and bass, whatever you do, you're welcome here. You know, everyone always thinks, oh, he's just a neurofunk guy, he just does drum and bass. I don't listen to that in itself like that often. I listen to loads of kinds of music, you know. I appreciate all genres. And anyone who's a aspiring music producer just wants to be part of my community. Everyone's welcome here who likes to make music, you know. You don't have to just be drum and bass head. But of course, I'm quite known for drum and bass. So this applies to all music production though. But yeah, cohesion, right? So something that lacks in beginners tracks, intermediate producers tracks, is a real sense of cohesion between the song. And this is often like a timbral thing and a sound texture thing. And so when you're producing a track, you're thinking about your drums, your basses, your leads, your vocals. You're thinking about all those elements and groups, right? And you're thinking about reverbs, delays, stuff like that. But what you also need to be thinking about is the actual sonic character and texture of the whole, song. And each song that you make will have like a particular sound to it as well, separate from the actual all the elements you're using. Like everything, when it comes together, you give rise to this particular like unique sound always, and so you need to pay attention to that and make your track feel like it's just one polished, professional, finished sound, and so how we do that is through the texturing. And it's about the timbres of the sounds that you use and how they like combine together, and then you've got this sort of overall sort of frequency spectrum kind of idea of like the kind of sounds that are going on, and your ear kind of pays attention to that, and you want that sort of consistency between throughout the whole track, where you've got those similar sounds and those similar frequencies that are being used, like from start to finish, So one thing you can do to get more cohesion is to use your main elements, whether that's your a certain synth lead or a certain bass, bass sound, is use elements throughout the whole song in some form or another, So rather than having loads of scattered individual sounds everywhere, that's gonna, cause less of a cohesive finish, But if you have less sounds and just the right ones and use them more throughout the whole track, then you'll have that cohesion because you're hearing the similar frequencies from a sound at the beginning of the track, in the build up, in the drop, and later on as well, So that's why it's really important to get good at resampling and this kind of stuff, because if you take like a bass line, you can resample it, you can create a drone out of it, you can resample it, you can create some other textures, you can create a riser out of it, you could even create like a like an atmospheric sort of impact sound using a bass. There's so many like new elements you can create from one sound. And especially if you're doing the kind of stuff I do in drum and bass, like that's what really helps you to get that cohesion, is to use your sounds you've already got and try to manipulate them into something new, and then use them like across the whole arrangement. And if you apply that technique to like everything that you have, you can start doing that with the drums. You can do little snare reverbs and create little reverses and do little risers out of the snare. You can take your hi-hat, super soften it, put loads of reverb and have it as this kind of background layer in the intro. You can take a vocal, like a vocal lead, you can chop one little word out of it, slap a load of delay on it, slap a load of reverb on it, and then make it into a pad or make it into another riser for the build up, something like that, So that's the beauty of resampling the audio that you have, is it allows you to create that cohesion between everything, And I would argue that doing stuff like that is going to get you far closer to like a fully cohesive track than doing something like using the same reverb on everything, I actually prefer using different reverbs on different sounds. This is a whole nother topic for a whole nother video, but actually being able to color sounds in particular ways with different reverbs can help to separate them in the mix, and I quite like that. And so it's not just about using like one reverb to glue everything together. It's actually more for me about just being mindful of the actual texture and timbre and elements and things that are going on, and trying to create this sort of cohesive narrative through those, you know? So another way, if I can just think, I had another idea for another way to get cohesion in a track as well. So we've got the same sort of elements being reused and remanipulated in new ways. I did think of another idea earlier. What was it now? It escapes me. It just escapes me. Ah, yes, I remember. So the other thing to really pay attention to when you're building cohesion is to think about the background, and always think about what's going on, you know, behind everything. All the stuff that you can't really hear, that you're not really focused on. That's what also creates a sense of cohesion as well. So a little bit how I was talking about resampling elements to use like in different parts of the composition, you can do that kind of similar thing to fill out the background as well. So you could, for example, you could take like a synth ARP, like a lead synth ARP, and you could do something crazy with it, put some creative effects on it, change the sort of texture, but it sort of comes from that original synth, right? You can really wash it out with reverb, really put it like low in volume at the back of the mix, you know, and then you could have it like, you know, really high passed, and then you create this sort of this depth layer that's come from one of your main elements that kind of sits in the background. I love to do that on my tracks, and then you can use that across like the whole track in a sense, you know, and then you've always got this sort of background, you know, texture that's sort of going on that ties everything together. So you want to think about like the depth of the song, and like creating like beds, like sound beds for things to sit on top of. So rather than just having like your dry drums, your dry leads, your dry basses, your dry vocals, you've always got something like in the background behind them. And, you know, as I was mentioning earlier, like using the same reverb on everything, that could be a way to do this, but it's not the only way. So you can intentionally create bed type sounds to be really low in the mix and really at the back of the room, so to speak, you know. So that's a great way to get cohesion. That's something that I always do. So you can do this in your drums as well, and you can layer them. For example, right, this is the best thing for getting drum cohesion is, you know, especially if you're making your drums, you're making them with one shots, you know, you've got a different kick, a different snare, different hats, a different top loop, and you kind of bundled together like a bunch of drum sounds, and you put it all together, right? The best way for me to get cohesion between that is to then, you know, once the drum break is kind of fully programmed and arranged, is to, like bounce out the whole thing, you know, the whole drum break, bounce it out on a fresh new layer, and then create a layer out of that using something like convolution reverb, using something like the Space Blender, or using something, some kind of other creative plugin that adds depth, and then putting it really, really low in the background, and then you've got this sort of depth layer that you've created behind everything, and that'll give you like cohesion, you know, between all of your drums, you know, and it's going to help with the cohesion of the whole track. Okay, and the same thing when you're layering up basses and stuff, you know, creating these bass layers that have lots of depth and sit, you know, really far at the back of the room. That also is going to help you with your cohesion across the whole track as well. So 2 main tips is resample your sounds more and use them across the timeline of the song, you know, from start to finish. So you've got a lot of cohesion going on between the whole, you know, from start to finish, you know, throughout the whole song. And then really pay attention to the background narrative. So you've written all your cool hooks, you've got your drum beats and everything going on, but like, how are you telling the story in the background? That's what's also going to build cohesion and give you that sort of sonic texture, that sort of ear candy, that sort of like, that nice little undetectable thing going on in the background that's kind of gluing everything together, you know? So that's my kind of tips on how to get more cohesion in your tracks, and something you have to always be mindful of when you're producing, so you can give that track its like unique flavor and like a fullness, and make it sound like it's one whole unit, one whole polished song, and it will sound a lot more professional as well. So I hope you guys enjoyed that tip. Hopefully it helps you guys out. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you absolutely smash that like button. Leave us a comment and subscribe as well. And check out the links down in my video. I've got some affiliate links for drum and bass sample packs that I recommend, mastering compressor, and creative plugins like the Space Blender that I recommend are down there as well. And also you can hit me up for one-on-one lessons. Book in directly via my calendar on my website. You can email me if you need any mastering work done, and you can support the channel by jumping over to my Patreon, and we have a wonderful Discord community, so we hope to see you in there. All right, until then, ciao ciao.